It's the Cody Podcast.
It's the Cody Podcast.
We're live.
Welcome.
Hopefully.
To those who join in on the upload, welcome. To those coming in to be live, you'll hear us in a second.
Yep, here we go. We are, in fact,
wow, I got
live
that
now.
I got that notification real quick this time. Hear us in a second. Okay. Cool.
Here, I'm gonna... let's see.
Is it live or can I check it out?
It is, in fact, live.
No, that was...
I need to get the link, though. Here we go. This is the best podcast. This is the podcast where we set everything up after we go live on stream for some reason. And we're clearly professionals.
Yes, clearly.
All right.
So far, I'm on here, so I'll be one viewer. I see two, so I don't know if you have it pulled up or if somebody else caught that. Either way, welcome if it's you or them. All right, so when we hit the politics side of things, we tend to ramble. So should we start off lighthearted, you think? Is that probably the way to go?
I don't know. There's literally so much ground that we could cover.
Yeah, it's just really hard to break away once we get down into that.
Yeah, and like I said earlier, like there's not much gaming news. They confirmed, the specs and stuff and like the release dates of the release window of the
next
game
generation.
systems.
Yeah.
But there's like nothing new.
Okay.
So I think this will probably wind up being mostly a pop culture and political stream.
All right. Well, let's hit it. Everybody, welcome my buddy Hayes.
Hey, what's up, everybody?
Unless he has a pen name he'd prefer to go as.
No, yeah, Hayes is perfect.
I listed you as Beanieman on the channel just because that's
oh,
what
nice. Yeah. That's my YouTube name.
That's your YouTube, yes. Mm-hmm. Also known as Haste
Eagle.
All
right.
right.
Thanks for having me on. I'm really excited to talk about these things, and hopefully I don't dumb down the podcast too much.
Oh no, we try to, and we keep it mildly dumb as it is. I mean, we have some mildly strong opinions. Sometimes one of us will go pretty deep. We'll just let them.
Okay.
Sometimes, like, especially when it comes to, like, we had some retro gaming stuff before, and that's really his domain, so he goes.
Okay.
And then
all right. Go hard in the paint on the retro. All right, I like that.
But like, so sometimes one of us will just take it and run with it, and that's fine, because as long as one of us is like semi-knowledgeable in something, it's enough to keep the time going, enough to get somebody's interest rolling, and
sure.
We can all still vibe off of it one way or the other. It stays free-flowing enough to where it doesn't really hurt anything per se. We don't really have hiccups. But I guess we'll probably just run right into it. So to start, if we're just gonna skip on the gaming thing to start with.
I mean, that's pretty much my thoughts on it.
First off, I want to go ahead and make a joke at myself because during the last podcast, now of course we do these once a month, right? So during the last podcast, I was actively talking about like Yang policy versus competitors of his, and well, after we shut it down, I opened up my phone to see that he had suspended his campaign.
Yeah,
like as I was talking about it and promoting it, which I think is hilarious.
That's kind of what happened to me. I got home after we had done that, and I was like, "This is a pretty good podcast." And then it was like, Yang drops out, and I was like, "Well, there goes
there goes half of it right there."
Yeah.
That was like all of it. But yeah, I mean, I retract nothing. I still think UBI is that important. So, I mean, as far as that's concerned, I just think it's super funny.
You know what's really funny to me, personally, is I now wish Yang was in more than when he was.
Real now?
Yeah.
After it's...
Because I'm looking into Bernie Sanders, because Bernie Sanders is getting more, what's the word I'm looking for? Articulate with his plans.
Okay, yeah.
And a lot of the plans, I'm like, I agree with the moral stance, but I'm not a big fan of the way you're going to try and, like, smash all this stuff in financially. Because, kind of what we ran into last time. I'm very fiscally conservative and very socially liberal.
I feel that.
So, like now I'm kind of like, oh man, maybe we should have stuck with that guy who had like, what was that slogan? Math.
Yeah.
Make America think harder.
Yeah.
I don't know if that was a joke or not, but yeah, math. That was pretty funny. I have delved a little bit more into Bernie's policy to see if it's changed anything from last running or if maybe anything else has come to light. And I saw that his plan for Medicare for all came as like, and it is a like a 4-year plan for him.
Mm-hmm.
So he intends to slowly kind of implement this over time, but there's still going to be stair steps because he's not going to do like a public option alongside the private option. So it's just kind of be like this weird giant stair step that's gonna it's just kind of at this point, if he were to get elected, it would be like a 3.5 year countdown until like everybody in that field just like loses their job, right. So it's like, and it's we see that in a lot of areas because of technology, but in this case it's more about policy. And then of course, whether it works or not, he would have to get reelected afterwards for another 4 years to keep it in motion and push it where it needs to go. Else somebody else will come along and probably just shut it all down again, and we'll just play the same back and forth that we did with Obamacare.
Yeah.
Every other left and right, scale that keeps doing that.
One thing that I have, dived into that I thought was interesting. So I guess probably a lot of my talking points are going to be more because like the last 2 podcasts and even like several of the ones that we did before we took the big break.
Right.
I was leaning way more liberal. Because like through the Trump presidency, I voted for Trump, and then through the Trump presidency, I've just grown to hate him more and more. And so, but like I'm kind of getting back on that conservative role again, is what I'm finding. So I did, because I've been interested in Bernie, because he's really the only one that I want up there.
At this point,
I've been doing research into some of his policies and like his ideologies, and it's so. I'm just gonna put this out there. He calls himself a democratic socialist, which I think at this point is really only to his detriment, because as far as what I have seen, he is not a democratic socialist. He has these socialistic policies, but he still very much has been outspoken about keeping businesses in the hands of the private sector. And every type of socialism, including democratic socialism, wants it to be owned by the government.
Yeah. So you mentioned earlier that you're a fiscal conservative social liberal. So I wanted to run something by you. So economists say that the Medicare for All plan will run somewhere upwards of the 55 trillion range.
Right.
So our national debt is essentially 30 trillion right now, 29 trillion, and it keeps on ticking up.
Right.
What's your opinion on like how he's going to pay for that, and has he struck a chord with you that this is something that he has a plan for, like it's not going to get away from him if it does get implemented?
So with me personally, hey, welcome to chat, viewer. Feel free to leave us some topics in the chat. We'll get to them. So regarding your question, I think with the Medicare for All, he does have a plan. He has not been particularly articulate about that plan up until like the last several months.
Yeah.
Now it's to a point where honestly you can go to his website and he's got like a calculator for exactly how Medicare for All would work for you. Now I believe that that's probably actually accurate, because it doesn't seem to. I know for a fact the Medicare for All personally would hurt me financially.
Yeah.
But not so terribly that I would be against it, because like virtually, not to put myself on a high horse at all, but virtually all of my friends don't have an insurance option that's even viable. That would be something that isn't half their paychecks. So I know almost all of my friends don't have health care because they can't afford it. It seems silly for me to be like, well, I'm going to lose $1,000 a year to turn around and be like, it's actually, I think if I remember right, it's something like more like $2,300-ish is what I'd lose every year to that.
Yeah, you did that calculator thing, right? Where
Yes.
you went in like what you average spend on healthcare.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did that as well, and I too would be negatively affected by it. But you bring up a good point. $1,000 a year, that's nothing compared to everyone that you know who doesn't have insurance now has an option.
Right.
So
And we've got some.
Voika hopped in here.
Yeah, if you can.
Force business to provide health care instead of a universal health care plan. I mean, there is that, but at the end of the day, I mean, it's just that like somebody has to pay for it. So
Yeah.
it's like depending on who pays for it. If you leave it up to businesses,
they're going to find a way to make it profitable for them.
So they've almost already tried that in a sense, saying that like if you give your employees X amount of hours a month or X amount of hours a week or something like that on average, like you have to offer it. But so in doing so, they just cut employees' hours and just avoided it at all costs. So there's going to be if you put something out there that's not going to be government funded, that somebody else is going to have the responsibility, and in doing so, they're going to look for loopholes. There always is going to be that. So, and I don't necessarily think it's the best way, anyways, because then there's still the profit incentive. Now, so far it's been you guys back and forth, and obviously I'll have a little bit of input here and there. I mean, like, fiscally, I always think we can mix things up and pay for things different ways. I mean, obviously, we haven't implemented a VAT tax yet, and that's still open and out there. Personally, I think having UBI is more important than something like universal health care or a lot of other things. But in general, there are other ways that we can have this stuff paid for. Obviously, he talks about a wealth tax, but we've seen how that doesn't necessarily work throughout. He would have to find a way to even rewrite the tax code in such a way that
you couldn't just stick it offshore.
Right, that the wealthy couldn't just evade taxes like they already do, right? You can't say the wealth tax will pay for it, and then the wealthy continue to not pay taxes, and it's like, oh, well, we didn't get the money.
Right, yeah.
Like, so it just doesn't work that way.
Right.
But
I think the best solution, because obviously, you know, if you just throw money at something liberally, I don't want to use that term, but if you just throw money at something, it's not necessarily going to fix it. However, you can't just ignore the fact that, like, you know, people who, if they want to get insurance, it's going to really impact them. That paycheck's going to get cut in half.
Right, yeah.
For me, I feel like the best solution would be basically take what Democrats want to do with healthcare, universal healthcare, but then just bring it down to a state level. So then, like, each state is responsible for the residents of that state. Whereas instead of just having this federal, you know, program try to take care of 300 million, you know, citizens.
Right, that there's just no way that they can keep track.
Honestly,
of anything.
Yeah.
I'm honestly right there with you on almost every single issue. I think it should be localized. I think localization of production, distribution, and any kind of policy, I think, would be best in general. But there are some things that make sense to have on a federal level. Like, obviously, something like this. And a lot of others, almost everything entirely. I say locally, let them figure it out, because it's different everywhere.
Yes.
You know, and it's going to affect economies differently everywhere. But obviously, different places have different densities of people, different needs from people, different cultures, and different standards of living and cost of living. So between all this stuff, that's why I think, like, specifically, and I'm going to keep going back to UBI just to graze it, but and I did this a lot in the past too. But like UBI specifically is going to have a different effect everywhere, because if you give every American the same amount of money every month, it's going to affect somebody in Tennessee a lot differently than it's going to affect somebody in Los Angeles, like big time, you know? Like, I think something like UBI, as much as I think that it's necessary for them to, mostly because they say they're talking about a VAT tax, right? But then if you just run a VAT tax in one state, then companies would just move to a different state to avoid the VAT tax, right? So it's like that would be something that would be kind of necessary to have on a federal level.
Right.
But
so there's no loopholes to get away from it.
Right.
And like you mentioned about the cultural thing, if you live in Tennessee, and obviously Tennessee's a red state, they don't want to do the universal health care for Tennessee.
Right, yeah.
You're still in the same situation, and I understand
right.
that. Yeah.
So what a lot of people are afraid of, just to finish this thought real quick, I'll pass it, is that whenever you add a public option, it's just underfunded and not worth it at all. And where a lot of people's plans will offer both a public and a private option. So they'll say, well, the public option is there if you can't afford an insurance plan, but it's not going to cover almost anything. And then you're stuck with a private option anyway, especially if you have pre-existing conditions, things like that, right?
Okay.
So that also gets to be a bit of a weird dichotomy because of the same issues. So in some sense, I mean, I understand the need to tax something on a federal level, but to allocate it down or delegate it rather to the state level, I think it would make more sense to. You could still run the same kind of a tax scheme to a point. I mean, maybe not the full level, but like
Sure.
like a little bit more in taxes to get it to a federal level, and then allocate resources to states specifically to allow them to decide how they want to run the local, you know, healthcare issues. Because, and like, if they even want to put it towards that, some might take it and redistribute it into something like, I mean, other subsidies or even UBI, things like that. Like, but let the states decide locally based on the culture and based on what people want. Because state funding, like if we are the United States, you can't leave a state to defend for itself just because it's not the most, high in production. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like they don't exactly have a lot going on, so there's not a lot to cycle. But they should be able to benefit from other states that just happen to be like cornerstones. Like, I mean, obviously New York does a lot, Los Angeles does a lot. So things like that. I mean, if you're already going to tax it and then spread it out in a certain way, like maybe something like that, just to let the states thrive on at least something, give them options. But otherwise, I mean, yeah, locally, I agree with you.
Cool.
That kind of cycles back around to your original question, which is, do you think Bernie has plans? I think for some things like Medicare for All, he does. I think he clings to certain things like that $15 minimum wage thing because it's a popular idea.
It is.
Yeah.
And that frankly scares the hell out of me for a lot of reasons. I've been over that in the past.
But yeah, no. So the thing is like socialized medicine. There's reports that it'll cost X trillion dollars. But the thing is when you start really looking at it and start thinking about all the things that would eliminate, all of a sudden, like I said, for us, because I'm guessing just because we make X amount of dollars, whatever that is, we're gonna lose a little bit of money to taxes. But most people are going to gain significantly. They don't have to pay for their copays or anything like that. And then you start thinking past that on like, well, it'll cost us X amount, but you're saving on all of the labor that it would cost to pay someone or a group of people even to go through insurance and claims. You get rid of the insurance industry essentially altogether.
Right.
And then all of a sudden you're not, you do have to probably make, like federal jobs to replace that. But being that you don't have to go through 10 or 15 different agencies and figure out all the loopholes and garbage.
Right, yeah.
You're saving on a lot of man hours of labor. So
yeah, you streamline the entire process. Now there's less hands in the cookie jar.
Yeah.
Less people to have to pay during the whole
A to
A process. Exactly. Yeah.
So, couple of things. One, Voica did hop in and he said, should people get to vote on how their money gets used? Yes. So for me, I mean, back in like high school, I came up with something which probably wasn't original, but I mean, it was in my mind at the time. I talked about it a lot. I even wrote about it on social media. But the idea of like a tax allocation form, like if you can imagine, whenever you do your taxes and you just mark off boxes of like different state departments or whatever, and just say, I want my taxes going to education and infrastructure and things like that, but not necessarily like just don't check off boxes that you don't want, like military spending or space exploration or whatever,
Right,
just like skip certain things. So on one end, yes, I definitely agree with that, and I think there should be a better way to do that. But because we're a representative republic, or rather same thing, representative democracy, we have people that get to decide for us what we want, what we have our money going to.
Can we sit on that for just a moment? We will definitely get to Jordan's next comment, but I could sit there and harp on this all day. The representative democracy thing. So this has been coming up again and again and again and again with people that I've been talking with. So representative democracy to me made sense back when telecommunications were either non-existent or
Right.
limited,
Mhm.
because obviously you got to have your representative to ride a horse out to the Capitol for 3 months and then
Right.
basically be your representative.
Right.
Now with the internet and everything else, you'd obviously have a lot of problems. You'd need security problems in particular. You'd need to address, but there's no reason to think it would be impossible to have a more direct representation. In other words, you want to go vote on this law, go to Knox, county portal or whatever.
Right. Yeah. It
And
could basically be like a glorified Reddit system, and just like say,
Right. Now,
there's
again,
issues in these.
there'd have to be some sort of more sophisticated way of doing it than just that, because that becomes mob pool.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
with our education system the way it is right now,
Mhm.
I mean, to put that in perspective, I'm going to go off on another topic here.
No, yeah.
So there was a rumor at one point that you could, and this was like, it was making fun of all of the essential oils people.
Okay.
There was a meme that was going around at one point that said you could cure hemorrhoids by sticking a potato in your butt. Now, no one fell for it initially, but now it's been going around that that's the cure for coronavirus.
Oh my god, yes.
And it's becoming so widespread. I mean, I'm sure there's not like a ton of people doing it, but it's becoming widespread enough that like actual doctors are writing opinions, like opinion articles in like legitimate news sites like, New York Times and stuff, saying, yeah, maybe don't stick potatoes in your anus. I think that was literally one of the titles of an article I read.
Maybe don't.
Yeah, maybe try something else.
And so you have to get that kind of person to not have the same kind of...
Yeah.
I mean, I know that sounds like oppressive, but really you don't want someone who doesn't understand anything voting on things that will affect everyone.
Yeah, and part of the representation is you are putting your trust into somebody to be able to analyze all these decisions that come across their desk every day and to make the best decision. So that is why I do kind of vote for the representation side of things.
Due to a point, I mean, obviously, I think we need to hard focus the idea of, I mean, like, obviously, a representative democracy, the way we have it, is what was necessary at one point.
Yeah.
And while it is antiquated, the rest of our system has not necessarily progressed to a point where we can do anything different, right? The same situation, like what you were saying, people are not educated, and an uneducated mass left to direct democracy would be mob rule. It just would. 51% would, lynch the other 49. It's just how that happens. But specifically because they're uneducated. Now, if we had other means in place, or some other type of system in place that's going to allow, people to have time, or maybe even reward them, say, like, and I don't want to say necessarily pay people to do research, like, per person or anything, but I mean, something that would at least allow them or give them the free time to be able to invest in something like that. I mean, like I've said in the past, I think UBI would be awesome because people would be able to use that towards anything they wanted. In one case, it could be reducing the work week so that you can actually focus on social issues and have an opinion, right? But the alternative, if we try to do direct democracy right now, would be something like a Reddit-style online board where you would have, like, and I don't know what you guys see in circles, but usually I see the same thing. There's some kind of leftist that'll type out this long diatribe of something, talking in circles, and quite immediately after, the next just says Trump 2020. Like there's no actual fighting back and forth. It's like one guy's arguing for the sake of saying things.
Yeah.
And this guy's just like, this is where I am. That's it. Like, I'm not giving you something to argue with me about. I'm not opening the door for you to change my mind. I'm just saying, this is where I am. But that might be based on nothing. It might be based on their family. I mean, like, Republicans get together, they make babies, and those babies turn into Republicans. And that's, it's the same way, like, Christians are most likely born from other Christians, because it's all, culture. It's small culture. From that point, it turns into more culture. And then, of course, whenever you are online, you create these bubbles, these echo chambers, and you create your own culture. So like me, maybe that's what I see just because I'm in my circles. I don't necessarily have a whole lot of, more intellectual, right-leaning friends on my Facebook that are like outspoken like that. So that just happens to be what I
mean,
see.
no, I do see that as well. I've only got maybe one friend that I can think of. You know Chris, right?
Yeah.
He's about the only person I would consider, quote, right-leaning.
Mhm.
And even he leans right most of the time, but he'll take these massive steps over to the left every once in a while. So, I mean, I don't know. I think each side has idiots, obviously.
Yeah, for sure.
I think the only reason you're seeing a lot more of it right now on the right is because we have a right-leaning idiot in office. If it was a left-leaning idiot, it would be the exact same thing on the other side of the aisle.
Exactly, yeah. And
really, you even, as much as I would say that Obama was at least more articulate than Trump, he had his own set of issues. He massively expanded the powers of the executive branch to a point that he never should have.
Right.
So there's problems with Obama. But with that being said, even when he was in there, he did not come across like an idiot, but you still had more, I would say, left-leaning people that were being very like aggressive.
They like empowered him because he was in office. Their guy was in office.
Exactly.
And empowered him to say something.
So I definitely, but I will say anecdotally, and keep in mind, Jordan in the chat, that we are in the South. We're in a deep red part of our state, which is actually a fairly moderate state, but we're in a deep red part of it.
Yeah.
So that's also probably why we see a lot more of like Trump 2020 or like I've literally seen people do the Trump 2024 thing, and it's like you realize you're literally voting for a dictatorship.
Yeah.
At that point.
Yeah. They're like, as long as it's Trump,
And with that being said, I kind of want to tie what you said and what Cody said. There really is no incentive to go out and learn about the processes and learn about government and like what these issues are that come across their tables. And like you said, like when you go online and someone lays out what their opinions are and just immediately goes to like a, fuck you. So I don't know if I can curse it, but yeah. But immediately just kind of like devolves into this back and forth against, red versus blue.
Yeah.
Literally. And so there needs to be an incentive for learning how everything works. And there needs to be an incentive for like conversations and arguments and debates that you actually like gain something from one another.
Right.
Where you're just, fighting off that horde coming at you, and you feel like you just have to defend what your ideals are.
Right, yeah.
Rather than, well, why does this person think like that? Like, why does that person want to vote for Trump again in 2020?
Right.
Because that's what I'm going to do. I personally, I am going to vote for Trump again.
See, I probably, assuming it's Biden, I probably will just abstain this time. I voted. I would not. I would have done the same last time.
But that's terrible. You can't just not vote, guys. I mean, that we can jump into this.
I'm essentially in doing that. I'm essentially voting for Trump because I know he'll win, without saying, yeah, I supported either of these people that I don't like.
Right.
I mean, abstaining whenever it comes to the voting of lesser two evils, I don't really see abstaining being much of a problem. It's like if you're voting for, in 2016, it was like, you're voting for like an idiot or a war hawk. And it's like, well, as it turns out, she's also an idiot and he's also a war hawk. So like, it doesn't really matter. But it's like, we've seen what she did with power.
Yeah.
I will say he was at least a whole lot less of a war hawk than anyone I think
at the
anticipated.
time. Yeah, there was nothing. But now we've seen a lot that he's done. I mean, he's done some pretty bad stuff whenever it comes to
I'll say he's made
affairs.
I'd say he's made some obvious foreign affair blunders, but I mean when it comes to actual wars, really hasn't done a whole lot.
Oh, he has. I mean, when he bombed Syria.
Before we go into this,
yes.
One thing I do want to talk about, because like you said, when it came down to Hillary and Trump, you didn't want to vote for Hillary just because she was the other person. Do you guys feel like Bernie's also kind of getting the same kind of deal?
What do you mean?
Put on, so yeah, let me rephrase that.
Yeah.
So obviously the DNC kind of worked against Bernie.
Yes.
They wanted Hillary to be the person to go up against Trump.
Yes.
Do you feel like that's happening again in this election cycle?
It is.
Yes, and it's sleazy, but I wouldn't say it's as sleazy. They're at least
it is. Hold on, I have something for this actually.
Okay.
Sorry, I don't want to like cut you off, but like yeah. So there's you've seen with the way the exit polls are and how that actually does and doesn't reflect certain things, but then the exit polls are so rushed that sometimes they are inaccurate. And normally they say the max that it could possibly be inaccurate is by about 4%. And then these last few primaries that we saw, it was a huge difference. And so last time, whenever we checked the exit polls in 2016, it was there were exit polls that came out showing one thing, and then after the fact, it was not only like a serious 4% variance per person. It was like Hillary had ended up getting somehow, or no, rather the exit polls versus like the actual ballots, like whenever they compared the two, Hillary had 4% more than what it initially showed, and then Bernie had 4% less than what it originally showed. So it was like kind of favoring like the what's the word, like the corporatist Democrats, in that sense. And then this time around, same thing happened, but Biden's now are reflecting 8% more. Like double the maximum.
Yeah.
And Bernie's is still 4% less. So it's like there's still some like really, really shady stuff going on, but very specifically, it's like it would be one thing if it's random,
Yeah.
It's like it happens once, I get it. But then twice in a row, the maximum possible drop to Bernie, because he's the only anti-establishment Democrat running.
Yeah.
It's like, come on, guys. At this point, like, we know everything's being rigged. We've seen it in the past, and we see it happening right before us now. But then also, like, and granted, like I said, I'm not the biggest Bernie supporter, so it's not like I'm just like blowing smoke here. It's
right.
like, I'm gonna call it like I see it, but also like the fact that Bernie is still polling as well as he is, and he was still the front runner for as long as he was, and they're quite literally siphoning votes, not just from him, but like taking them from him and then putting them into Biden.
Yeah.
It's like even before everyone else had dropped out, it was still the same thing was happening, and it was coming from him and from the others and going to Biden. And now he's been like this. It's like this weird, crazy artificial inflation. I really don't understand it.
So, just to add to that a little bit, I definitely think this might, I don't know, this might flame whoever's in chat a little bit, because it always seems to. I really see a lot of parallels between Bernie and Trump. They're both populist candidates, or at least Trump acts like he is. Bernie acts like he is. The American people obviously fall either kind of like on Bernie or Trump, and that's kind of the people that the American public wants right now. No one wants any of the other Democratic candidates. No one wanted any of the other Republican candidates in 2016. And, I think it's one of those things where if the Democrats could just not be, horrible at winning,
they just...
like, because the Republicans, none of them like Trump. Sean Hannity, I still don't know how we got to this point, but I remember in 2016, Sean Hannity, his words were, "Hold your nose and vote Trump." And now we're at this point where Sean Hannity's head is so far up Trump's ass. Like, I don't know how we got to that point, but my point is that the Republicans fell in line behind the obvious choice. The Democrats just don't seem to want to do that. They want their own person, or they don't want anything. They don't want the people to seem to have it.
Right.
A choice.
It doesn't help that the DNC has their own agenda, right? They would literally rather lose than have somebody that's an anti-establishment candidate.
Right.
And that's...
Because I feel like what they see is like, what's the point of getting Bernie into office? He's not going to cooperate with what we want out of it.
Right.
So we're not going to support that. We're going to do everything we can to resurrect Joe Biden's campaign when he miraculously went from last to, now first.
Right.
So
crazy. And they refused to call Bernie a frontrunner, and then as soon as Biden took the front-running status by 48 delegates, I think it was, something like that. They were like, why doesn't Bernie just drop out now? Like
Right,
why doesn't he just drop out?
yeah.
We need to drop out. Like, we need to unite the party. And it's like, literally, I mean, aside from the fact that we still have Maine and Washington and a couple other, semi-big states, it's like, I mean, like, it's quite obvious how, I mean, like, now Warren, I understand. She's getting a lot of heat lately, and we can, that's like that's a little segment on its own. Like, she used to be all right, she was a semi-viable candidate. I kind of like some of the stuff that she was doing, but at the end of the day, she shifted so much the past few months, man. Oh my gosh, she just got dirty, and then she started attacking Bernie, and then really just started lashing out in general at all the others, which were through like Buttigieg, whatever. And then Biden, I mean, deserving. And then started coming up with some weird stuff against Bernie, and then started lying about his stance on things, which was weird because it's not her. Like, I liked her, like, I really wanted to support her, and then the stuff started coming up. I'm like, that can't be right. That's not her. And then of course now she's taking super PAC money, and then she still hasn't endorsed anybody.
No, yeah, she's being very like tactical about it. Like,
barely. This is like, she's pretty much. Like, she's done now. At this point, everyone's already made their other decision. Or, like, doesn't care what she has to say, because it's like, you should have backed somebody, like, before the primary, and then you didn't. And now you're just kind of sitting on it. And the big primary, rather, like, as, like, those states were, like, the last big run.
Yeah.
And, like, now she still hasn't said anything. And there's a lot of speculation that it's because she just has to look for herself, which is, that's any politician out there at this point.
True.
Aside from very, very few.
Jordan has been making some comments I agree with very much. His first one, I'm sorry, I don't know. I obviously can't see you, so I don't know what your gender is.
That's Jordan Boyka?
Jordan.
Okay.
That's a guy.
Yeah.
Boyka's here, yeah. He's been in here for a while.
Nice.
But yeah, no, Biden can't remember anything. That's very true. I was actually just talking with Cody about this before the stream. My favorite one is my long friend, time friend, who's been a friend, always been a friend, has been my friend in and out of public life.
So here's my opinion on that, because I kind of get this sense of what you guys feel like. I think he's just tired. I think he's just. I think he's just 100%, exhausted.
But I mean, dementia gets worse at night. So.
Ouch!
No, I think
I mean, he's on those long flights, and like he's got to be up like what 20 hours a day.
There's an article I was showing him right before the podcast, right before you got here, I should say, and it was, the name of the article was Joe Biden's brain is Swiss cheese, and it's really creepy that we're not talking about it.
Oh man, I mean, like, it's one thing, but it's like, and it's in stark comparison to, like, a stark contrast rather to the other candidates. I mean, nobody else is really falling apart this bad. He's been losing it forever.
Yeah,
and like, even and they're likening it to, like, he had like 2 aneurysms in like '96, I think, or something like that, and he was running for president in '96 as well. So like, he had this really weird stance on things. He had a whole platform that he was going on that was just like fucking strange. And then he ended up not getting any support, and then he started plagiarizing speeches, and then it forced him to drop out.
Whoa, okay.
Yeah, it was like a big deal. Yeah. And like, now like word for word on some of them that were just like, okay, you literally had to have like read it somewhere and then forgot, or like quite literally copy pasted. But like, now we're in the age of the internet, so he can't come up with his own speeches, and like, he's just gonna say shit to start talking out of his ass. I don't know. But like, I don't. Anyway, so there's another big thing I want to move on to at some point. But if you guys want to keep doing this, we can. I'm just saying, like, I have something that I wanted to talk about. So
Well, I was just gonna say, for the Biden thing, I feel like the reason why that elephant in the room is not being discussed as much is because everyone's kind of wanting to stand behind Biden as the presumptive nominee.
It's got to be,
Do you feel like that?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
and like,
here's
the
thing.
media supports him big time. So like,
here's the thing.
Who
wants to? I mean, it's funny until it's true, right? Like, who wants to be the person that points out and be like, the dude has dementia?
That's true too.
Like, it's kind of like pointing at your grandpa and being like, I think you're losing your mind.
That's
and they're going to talk about. I'm not trying to suck Bernie's dick that hard. I'm really not. But like, they tried to like make a big deal about like they'll bring to light in the middle of the debates. They'll say like, Trump, where's your tax returns? And then like, Bernie, where's your medical records? But then they're not going to attack Biden on this and say the same thing.
Right. Well, it's funny. I forget what his name was. I think it was Castro. Really early on.
Oh yeah,
was like,
yeah.
Did you forget what you said?
Yeah,
like literally earlier in the debate.
Castro.
Like, yeah. Because he was saying
I'm not even a big fan of him, but that was one of them.
It was pretty funny.
Right there.
Yeah.
So, there was a list that came out of Biden's potential cabinet positions. You guys saw that?
I did not.
Okay, so
is Warren on there?
Yes.
Where
it
is
explains
she?
a lot. They're talking about making her Secretary of Treasury.
See, I don't see.
Or potentially VP, but it was on
I was ready to say.
for...
I was ready to say if she got VP, that's the only way I see Biden pulling it off.
And that's if she really went for it. But honestly, I think that's the reason that she didn't end up endorsing Bernie was because, like, she's out looking for herself, just like all the others. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm going to vote for this guy, or I'm going to endorse this guy because, he's what the establishment is pushing, so he's most likely to win, unless the underdog somehow gets it. But he's literally running against the media, and that's the hardest thing to do. So there's that, but also, like, his cabinet, like, almost, like, 90% of the names on the list were from, like, banks, Yeah. It's that same, like, revolving door situation, even though, everybody... Like, literally both the left and the right establishment, every time they get in, they do the same thing. They're pulling in people from like, CEOs from banks, JP Morgan Chase, Citibank, all this, just like, it's a revolving, it's like, get them into positions of power. And Trump did the same thing, and it's funny that, he has a plan, like, one of his plans says to, like, return America to normal or something like that, which I have so many problems because, like, that was the name of it, and he has, like, what he was going to do, but, like, his name was, like, return things to normal, and he's basically, like, with the context of, like, pre-Trump, because Trump messed a lot of things up apparently. Mm-hmm. So, like, he plans to return things back to normal, but on two accounts. On one, normal, which this is directly ripped off of the Young Turks. I think Jake was saying this, but he said normal was the state that we were in that gave us Trump. So on one hand, maybe not, but also, secondly, normal is what's causing a lot of the problems and social issues we see today. Like, the reason there's a lot of political issues that we're talking about floating in the air is because the system as it works right now is in a state of decay. It's like a cancer stage that is making everything worse. So we can't say normal or business as usual because it obviously isn't working. That's why we have these detrimental outcomes. And then 3, normal, like... He's trying to say that the things that Trump did was wrong, whenever literally he hasn't done almost anything of his own ideals aside from the wall.
Right.
Everything else, and of course, a couple of the deals too, which were inevitably going to dissolve anyway. But
real quick, welcome to the stream. Whoever just joined.
Oh, I see that, number 4. Thanks for stopping in.
Feel free to leave some talking points in the comments.
Yep.
And we will definitely entertain those points.
Of course, finally, he says he wants to return things to normal, but, like, talking about he wants to reverse things that Trump did, but then if we get him in, he's going to do the same thing by bringing in from that revolving door, right?
Right.
So it's like even somebody who everyone praised as being an outsider came in and still pulled everyone from the higher echelons of the market. And that's what I was talking about leading up to the 2016 election, was that, like, you can't, quoting my friend Laura, you can't take Al Capone and make him the warden of the prison. Like, the whole point of government is to keep market in check, because market, if left unchecked, would inevitably destroy us all, because wealth consolidation is a natural gravitation, right? Mm-hmm. And you have all these other issues that are caused by the market. That is the only reason the government or state exists to begin with, is to regulate certain bits so that people don't just die, right? We don't live in a Malthusian era. We are beyond that, and we understand that, that's not really the way the world works. We can keep things in check, but of course, we take him and put him into the upper echelons of the market. He gives himself and his buddies tax breaks, and then he opens that revolving door even more. And then, like, what else did you expect? You take somebody that's supposed to be controlled, or otherwise risk serious detriment, and then put them in a position of power where they make their own rules. I mean, that's literally what we're all afraid of. So, I mean, that was my big opposition to Trump. I mean, like, I think he's an idiot, but, you know, Bush was an idiot too, and that doesn't seem to bother people whenever it comes to electability. So, that's kind of where my mind goes on it. It's like, he's going to try to run on this, like, anti-Trump stance, and literally all he's going to do is maybe possibly stop the wall. But otherwise, everything else he's doing is going to be the same.
Exactly.
He's not changing anything. I mean, he's an established Democrat, which means he ultimately is going to have the same goals as pretty much any Republican that you put up there.
Yep.
Like, but with the exception of anybody that might be like moderate Republican, which is classic liberal, which is a really funny thing on its own. I'm sure you guys have heard of that.
Oh yeah.
And And then, of course, like someone from the Libertarian Party or something might having a little bit better ideals about small government localization. But I mean, ultimately, they're all doing the same thing.
So here's a random thing that just popped into my head.
Yeah.
Actually, before I get to that,
Yes.
I'll place that over here for just a moment. The guy I work with, he has a theory that the DNC is going to force Hillary to become Biden's VP. Then when Biden gets in, they're going to claim that he is unfit.
And then make
Oh,
no!
man.
And and that's the thing is he's a conspiracy theorist, but you know what? That kind of makes too much friggin' sense. Except for if he names Hillary as the VP, that ticket will become like, I don't know what it'll become like, but no one will be wanting to touch it.
Yeah. No, I agree.
God, that is terrifying. I honestly wouldn't be surprised, and I'm kind of mad at myself that I didn't consider that yet. Like on my own, I shouldn't have that spoon fed to me. But my God, man, because Hillary honestly has been very vocal lately. You know,
Yeah.
Yes.
And she's getting more so. It's like she's about ready to do what the Democrats seem to do best when they actually do win.
Yeah.
Just like with Obama, it's like, oh, here's all of our people, and then we whittle them down, and then it's like 2 guys left, and then Obama, out of
wild
nowhere.
card, yeah.
And I could see it. I don't know how it would happen, because you put Hillary's name next to anything, and I feel like it's, friggin'...
Yeah, it's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah,
at this point, yeah.
And she's scary, dude.
But so, to go back a little bit, we were talking about socialized healthcare.
Yes.
The benefits and the issues.
Yeah.
So that same coworker of mine put forth an idea that I feel like has probably been done before to some extent, because it sounds like an old kind of idea, a very simple idea regarding healthcare, which is this. You got your hospitals, you know. Right now, all the medical students just work at normal hospitals, and they have to work X amount of hours, and they usually don't get paid, or get paid like very poorly. They don't get like any extra benefits from doing that. It's just something that they've got to do.
Right.
So here's what you do, and obviously it would not be as effective as a single payer healthcare system.
Right.
But it would be a big step in the same direction without requiring the government interference. You take those people, because they got to work at a hospital regardless. You start making hospitals across the country that's just student hospitals, very low cost, and you put these people in there. It helps them pay their way through college, maybe give them like the room for free, or give them a discount on their tuition, or, whatever, something, And then when they get through medical school, you say, okay, so you can go off and get a job wherever you like. That's fine. But you're going to come away with still about this much amount of student debt. If you want to work here, we will pay you a living wage, and we'll also pay off your student debt completely if you work for us for X amount of years.
I can dig that, but honestly, whenever it comes to the costs, I mean, the biggest thing isn't even like the cost of
the actual facilities.
It's the things themselves. The
pharmaceuticals.
Yes, the
mostly.
Pharmaceuticals, the products per se, because there's so much money to be made there. That stuff is jacked up, like in the thousands of percents, easy all the time. Like, I mean, just like insulin alone is obviously a big talking point, but literally everything.
Yeah, and see, that's the thing that socialized medicine helps curb. You don't see that. You don't see those price gouging in any country of socialized medicine because they have a lot more input as to
Right.
what the prices of those things can be.
Right.
How do you do that without getting the government involved? That's always the big question.
Yeah.
And you have to do it with some sort of incentive. If you try and punish people, they're just going to give you the finger and go about their business.
Yeah, exactly.
So I don't know. It was just something that I was kind of like, I want people to understand that there's not just one way to go about this.
Of course.
But there's only one candidate that's even making this an issue right now, and that's why I support Bernie. It's not because I like everything he does.
Right.
There's actually quite a bit that I don't like about him.
Yeah.
The more I'm becoming, more savvy to a lot of his ideas and
Right.
stuff.
Yeah.
But he's the only one that makes any sense when you talk about real issues. Obviously you got to have real solutions, but he's the only one that's even addressing the issues to begin with.
Right. And I'm right there with you. And I didn't even realize until after I started looking a lot deeper into Yang, obviously a few months back at this point, but like his plan was to run a public option alongside the private option. And he said like his goal was to fund the public option until the private options are no longer viable, right? Until like you're paying for almost nothing else extra. And then of course on top of that he's talking about the same thing Bernie and Warren and Klobuchar were talking about, which was of course somehow getting rid of the profit incentive in the actual medications themselves. But Voika was responding to you there saying, how can you make a doctor take a pay cut like that? And then the problem is that the hospitals are going to have lower quality.
So, two things. As I said, I saw that too, and I wanted to respond.
Yeah.
So, how can you make a doctor take a pay cut like that? Because you're going to pay off their student loans way faster than they could ever do it themselves. That would be the incentive there. Because essentially you're going to make that money, but it's just going to go directly to your student loans and pay them off way faster.
Right. Yeah.
But the other thing that he said, which is the problem is that the student hospital is going to have lower quality. Well, I hate to tell you, but the single-payer healthcare system, and I'm sure he's right there with me when I'm about ready to say this, because he seems like he leans a little right. The single-payer healthcare system is going to have the same damn problem. Now, it's going to be mostly with specialized medicine. People will be able to go to a clinic or get shots or do normal things. But the second you have something like what I did last year, where like freaking pelvic floor just takes a shit and like, your body just goes to hell. Yeah. Anytime you're dealing with something like that in a single payer healthcare system, I mean, you might still get good quality care, but you're going to wait for it. And that's the big problem with the single payer healthcare system.
Right.
Is that there are going to be long wait lines, and there's going to be no real incentive for any kind of medical, what's the word I'm looking for? Not invention.
Like ingenuity?
Yes. No one's going to make new, bigger, better medical practices or instruments when there's no incentive to do it at all.
Yeah.
So, inevitably, the wait times, I think, I haven't delved super deep into this. I know it's an issue with Canada and such, but like whenever people can be taken care of, they will be taken care of. I mean, like I will refuse to go to the hospital for one if it's something that I think I can get over in a matter of like a week,
Yeah,
right.
Like, but like that could have really negative effects on my body over time. That's aside from the fact, but like a lot of people who probably should be going to the hospital or maybe get a recommendation from like their family or something, like maybe you should go get it checked out, whatever. Those people aren't going right now because they can't afford it.
Right.
But once you make it a right or give everyone the access,
kind of open the floodgates, so to speak.
And you see how many problems there are, that kind of brings up a bigger issue. It's not necessarily the wait times. It's one, our ability to manage a volume like that is already out there needing attention, and two, it's the fact that somehow we let all these problems run rampant between like the shitty foods and diets that we put out.
Yes.
Like the food that's good for you is like 5 to 6 times more expensive than cheap garbage food. There's a whole lot of problems systemically that cause certain issues. And on one end, this is actually a really, really big talking point right now But if we had a universal healthcare system or something to the effect that people could be going and being taken care of, we wouldn't have to fear the coronavirus issue that bad.
Right.
Because you don't have people that are like, oh, I can't afford it. I'm sick. I don't know what it is. And I don't have time to look into it because I have to be at work tomorrow.
Mhm.
And I work 6 days a week. And I can't afford to not go to work because I already can't afford to go to the hospital. Like, I definitely can't take off work and go to the hospital.
Because then I'm
Right.
like double dipping on my shitty situation.
Yeah,
Yeah.
financially, I just can't. I literally can't. And on the second hand, it's like I might have something like coronavirus. I might not. I might be spreading it. I don't know. I don't have the mental capacity to even think about that because of where I am financially.
Right.
So, like, that alone, just because we're not taking care of people, means that it's going to be a much bigger issue in America than it is any other country with socialized medicine.
And yeah, I agree with what you're saying, and I actually really like that you brought that up because I'd never thought about that before. You know, I just figured, oh, well, long wait lines, and that's kind of as far as I went into it because that's just pretty much a fact.
Yeah.
Basically, any single payer healthcare system has got that problem, unless they offer a private option to the
Right.
public, which is what Germany does, and they actually still have some interesting wait time issues.
Mhm.
But I'm glad that you brought that up because I'd never thought about, well, this is all just going untreated right now.
Exactly.
You know, like, so there is something to be said about that. It's better to be waiting in a line than to just, like,
Mhm.
not be doing anything.
Yeah. So right now, there are a couple of things going around. One, they're saying that the government should offer to cover testing for this when they're not right now. Right? So obviously, if I'm going to have to pay for the testing myself, there's no way I can afford to go out and get tested. I think there was a report somebody did where it cost an average of about anywhere from $1,400 to $1,600 to get tested.
$3,250.
Wow, really?
$3,250.
Okay, I haven't seen that.
If you don't, what you just said is if you have insurance.
Oh, yeah, okay, so, yeah.
So, yeah.
$3,000 to get tested, like, I couldn't afford, that's like a third of what I actually feel like I have to spend in a year, you know? Like, I definitely can't take time off from work for something like that because I'm obviously double dipping in that problem. Secondly, shit, where was I? Hold on. So, I straight up lost myself. I'm having a Biden moment here, I'm sorry.
Okay, you're good. You're good.
My
Just
long
a pony
friend,
soldier.
time friend.
Long friend, time
Pony
friend.
soldier.
You know, the thing.
The thing, yeah. So on one end, people are saying that you should be, like, the government should be covering this. On the second end, here I go back to my UBI thing. Yesterday, and I think the day before, they've been talking about a stimulus to help boost the economy in like this awful like period that we're in right now. People are trending on Twitter was UBI stimulus. So they're saying put in a UBI temporarily to give us a stimulus in a way, right? So what's happening is you're putting the money in people's pockets so that they themselves can decide between, like, you know, stepping off of work, going and get treated. That can help them pay for their premiums or the deductibles, I mean, whenever they go in and have to deal with this. I mean, that between that and then, of course, having the extra spending money to inflate the economies, local economies, just a little bit will keep the crash from being as heavy.
Yeah.
So a temporary UBI stimulus would help take care of this problem, at least to some degree. It would cover probably about 80% of ground for like the problems that we're seeing right now. But then on top of that, it also would be a really, really good test run or a sort of a study if they focus
soft
enough.
Opening of the UBI.
Right, yeah, and then they can close it down and check all the results and everything like that. But yeah, I mean, something like that, I never even considered it. I didn't see it until last night when I was going to sleep, and there was a post somebody made from like the day before where they were like, UBI stimulus trending on Twitter, and I went and looked it up, and sure enough, it was there. It was #1 trending on Twitter in politics. It was crazy.
So one thing I kind of want to tie in together with your UBI and with like the cost of everything.
Yeah.
I feel like I wish I had more time so I could like research why everything does cost so much. Like when you go to the hospital, because obviously you're not just paying the doctor, you're paying the equipment fee, you're paying like the handling fee, you know, all that other stuff.
Right.
How much is that? I almost want to say how much is that is kind of price gouging because they know, all right, more often than not, people who come into the hospital, they're going to have insurance. Insurance is going to cover 80% of this.
Right.
So
yeah.
So why not, you know,
So it's almost them
it
gouging
costs
each
me
other.
exactly. So why not? Like, let's say this medicine. No, that's a bad example. Let's say this X-ray machine. It costs $250 to make, $350 for the hospital to buy, but I'm gonna charge a $600 fee every time someone comes and uses it,
Right.
because I know the insurance is gonna cover 80% of that.
Right. Yeah.
So what's my incentive to keep that cost low?
right.
Because, like you said, unfortunately, profit drives a lot in this
Yeah.
country.
Mhm.
So if I want to make sure that my hospital's still around and doesn't like shut down because the one across from me is making more money
Mhm.
and they can afford to get better things or attract better doctors,
Right. Yeah.
I'm gonna have to do what I need to do to like make sure when I do get somebody come in, I make some sort of profit.
Right.
So it's almost like there needs to be some sort of cap to that. So like with the insurance it doesn't just like bail the hospital out, and then
Right.
like you said, the hospital doesn't just
Right.
bail the insurance out.
Right. So I think that is a really, really good point. And stacked even on top of that is the fact that people can't afford to pay their medical bills. So how much of that gouging is due to the fact that X% of people don't even pay their hospital bills whenever they get them, they go into collection. So how does the hospital even stay afloat? Unless some people actually do go in with insurance and actually can pay a deductible, and the insurance does cover whatever's happening, right? So like maybe it's 2 to 3 times more than even they want it to be, because it has to be, because people are so poor, and the fact that they only go during an emergency and then they can't afford, you know, the $1,000 to $4,000 to $5,000 bill
Right. Yeah.
whenever
yeah.
that comes, right?
That's true too.
So,
Yeah.
like, I mean, all these things escalated on top of it, and honestly, I think, and not to venture off too far into a random direction, but I think schooling is the same way for a college.
Yeah, I completely agree.
College is like incredibly inflated for no conceivable reason.
Yeah.
But then at the same time, how much is it because they think, to your point, oh, this is going to be paid for through scholarships, because this is a higher end school. People are going to want to come here. They're going to be smarter kids. They're going to be going for these, like, the grants that they're getting from the state and
The
then
subsidized loans.
Yeah, it's like they can pay for it. It doesn't matter. Let's just make money.
Let's just keep charging. Let's just keep the tuition going up.
Right.
It's still the same exact thing it was 20 years ago.
I'll tell you, education, just because of like all of the different experiences I've
And
had,
culture too.
is something I could literally talk about forever.
Mm-hmm. We've been down this road a couple of times.
Down this rabbit hole.
Like, if I had to boil my views on education down in this country to, I guess, 2 big things. The first thing I'd say is get rid of high school as is, because it's almost all liberal arts garbage. I mean, teach the basic English, teach the basic math that you're going to use every day.
Right.
Teach just enough American history that people aren't like stupid, you know, and enough, just enough science to make sure that people aren't stupid. But like, you don't need like all of this super advanced, like, well, we're gonna read whatever. There used to be a point in this country where you went to high school not to learn general education, but to learn how to be like a normal functioning citizen.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know, shop classes were required.
Right.
Economics, a requirement, so that you could figure out how to do your taxes. All this stuff. And what has happened, fortunately, is we went from that, where it was all more practical knowledge,
Right.
Setting you up to either go to college or learn a trade, to where now high school is literally just the first 2 years of college spread over 4 years.
Right.
And so it's literally pointless. You got to do something with one or the other. And I say get rid of high school as it is. Go back to teaching people how to be normal functioning citizens.
Right.
Because, you know, as someone who, I look back at myself and I'm like, man, I took a long time for me to grow up, like in certain respects.
Oh yeah.
Like, it would have done me a world of good to take just one shop class or just like one automotive class. I would have bitched about it tooth and nail.
Yeah.
But it would have helped me so much earlier on.
Right.
And then just let people who want to go to college, that's their first 2 years of college, as it should be, because college is about the educational experience, or it should be.
Right.
You know, people used to go to a trade school to learn how to do a job, and college to get an education.
Mm-hmm.
and now it's all been rolled up into the university ball.
Right.
And university doesn't do any of it well anymore, and they charge you out the nose for it.
Right.
Yeah.
So, interesting thought on that, because this actually taken me to something that I was thinking about earlier that I didn't get a chance to put in. But there was talk a little bit. I know a Yang's campaign was pushing for it, but also there were just other circles that were still talking about it. Was dropping the voting age down to 16, and first glaring thought is whoa. Whoa. But then at the same time, I thought about it a little bit deeper, and I was like, maybe that's a really good point, because on one hand, some kids don't even get to vote until they turn 21 because of that, because 17 they can't, so they don't get to vote until they're 21. But aside from that, if you drop it down to 16, then kids are still in school while they're available to vote. So you can actually have classes that have to do with the electoral process. Like, I, in high school, didn't learn. I mean, I took government class twice. The first time I failed it because the teacher, like, had it out for me. The second time I passed with a 96.
Oh,
like I understood at least, the general understanding of it, but they never taught us the electoral process. Like, I never really knew anything about primaries or like anything aside from the fact that there was an election day and that's when you vote. But it's like, no, there are multiple elections because you have to choose who you want on the ballot and then push for that person all the way through. I mean, obviously it's weird enough that, like, I mean, in Europe they only talk about, they run their campaigns for, like, I think it's a month and a half, 2 months flat, maybe tops. And then it's like they vote and it's done. But here we campaign for 2 years in advance, spending millions and millions of dollars into advertising and campaigning. And then we have obviously multiple debates, and we have the primaries that are in each state. And then, of course, by the time it gets to election day, everything else is already figured out, and you're either a wasted vote because you're not voting for your elected or electorate, whatever, there's a word there.
I don't know,
your candidate or whatever. So like kids could actually, first of all, schools need to teach that, but also they can be taught that depending on what year they're in and when election is coming up, and like they can know the entire process before it comes. And obviously within their classes they can have like debate classes about, like, people can find out where they are. Like, I didn't even know where I was until I was 19 years old. 2 years after I graduated high school.
Right.
Like, I didn't even know a lick about who I am as a person. I got out of school at 17, and I literally took a year off because I was actually blessed enough to do that. Like, I was living in the situation where I didn't have to work to stay alive. My grandfather took good care of me. So I was able to take a full year to just, I went down documentaries, internet rabbit holes, everything. I found who I vibed with and what made sense. I found that the mainstream media was garbage and I had to find some other forms of media, but then I pulled multiple media sources because you can't trust just one. They're all biased, at least to some degree. So, like, I did all this to find out who I was. And then after that, 19, I finally understood, like, kind of where I stood, and then it kind of, grew from there.
Yeah.
But, like, they didn't teach me anything like that in school. And I sure as hell come, like, the 2016 election, where I was finally ready to start focusing on something, because, like, by the 2012 election, that was whenever I was, like, because I graduated in 2010 at 17. So, like, 19, I would have been able to vote in the 2012 election, but I have no idea what was going on. I didn't know any of the candidates or anything, because I was still learning who I was, not necessarily following the 2-year campaign. And then, of course, I was like, all right, I'm going to finally, like, this time around, I'm going to actually know these candidates. I'm going to halfway put a little effort in. And then I didn't really do anything because in my mind, I was like, election day is not for 4 years. Right, and then, of course, whenever it comes closer, it's like, but I want to, like, based on what I've seen, I don't really care for much of any of these guys, but I'd like to vote for Bernie. Like, well, he's not on the ticket. You'd have to write him in. I'm like, but shouldn't he be on the ballot? Like, no, she was chosen. So it's like her or him. Okay, I'm not playing this game. Like, I've already learned enough at this point to understand that this is the lesser of two evils, and I don't like either of these people. And I was still at the time even talking about it, where, like I said, like, that's like you took someone from the higher echelons of the market and you took someone long-lasting in the government who's a war hawk and you put them together. And I refuse to support any of that. It's gonna be a shit show no matter which way we go, and I'm not gonna be, a part of that, personally held responsible myself from others or from myself about how that goes down. So I'm just gonna abstain. And now this time, finally, I understand the electoral process, and at least a good deal of, between the the primaries and following like which states, like the delegates. Like I actually understand things to this point, but like I never understood that as a kid. And I think that's probably a big reason why we would have a lesser younger voter turnout. I mean, it doesn't necessarily explain why, the giant decrease this time. But I think if we want to turn that around, drop the voting age to 16, actually teach this stuff in school, and even handhold them through their first like voting process.
Right.
And then like,
Well,
I think that's a direction to go.
So kind of going back to what both of you guys said, it's funny because back in the day when high school was basically there to train people how to like be successful and competent members of society.
Right.
That was before we had, fast connection. That was before we had internet. That was before we had that direct representation conversation we had.
Mm-hmm.
So we do have access to where people can learn that stuff outside of that environment. So I do like high school being somewhere you can learn abstract thought or abstract subjects, because I think that's a good opportunity for someone to find if they have an aptitude in something, and that's where they can like walk down a more I don't want to say sophisticated, but a higher education path, I guess, for lack of a better phrase. And so what you were saying, Cody, you kind of answered your own predicament, because I would feel more comfortable if young voters did what you did. They did their own research. They went through their own, avenues of trying to find out like where they fit in the big puzzle, where they fit in the grand scheme of things. I wouldn't feel comfortable having someone decide what I'm going to show the next generation of voters, if that makes sense, because there's going to be some level of bias behind anybody, whether it be someone who's conservative or right in like the red states, or someone who's Democrat and liberal in the blue states. So there's going to be some hand in that guidance if we were to, like, as you said, hold their hand through their first election cycle.
Right.
So
I
having the voting age where it is allows them to go through the process that you did.
Right. But I mean, I was lucky to be able to have that because I didn't have to work for a living until a year after I graduated. Most kids now are already working by the age of 16 before they're even out of high school.
Right.
And then they'll go straight from that into community college. And like, they have no time to themselves to be able to do this. They just want to enjoy their free time. They want to play games or their extracurriculars or whatever else. They barely, I mean, like, there's very little time for play, much less more studying on something that isn't, you're not getting tested on, right? I mean, people can go their whole life without voting and never actually like experience a negative, like, thing because of it. Whereas, you can't just go fail a test and be okay, right?
So you want the same people who have no desire to learn about politics to go vote as soon as possible?
No, so I want them to have the option to, right? I mean, obviously, on some base level, obviously, there's the fear of like anybody other than us teaching our kids something, right?
Right.
It's like if I were a parent, and I say all the time, I don't want kids, whatever, I'm not even interested. But if I did have a kid, I would be terrified of anybody else raising my kid. Like the idea that you would have two working parents paying for somebody else to raise their kid, and then wondering how your kid turned out the way it did, like mind-blowing, really, right? I mean, like, what the hell? But like, for me, it's like, as obviously you would have to put some things into place where you already have government teachers in high school, right? I mean, I have pulled the bias out of them whenever I was in there. Like, I know exactly where they stand on the spectrum, the teachers I had, but it's like they still had to tell you in an unbiased manner how certain things work, right?
No, I agree. I think there is a level of professionalism that we expect where they can they recognize their own bias and they can step away from that, and they can be more pure.
Right.
And I still think it would be a hard sell.
I was ready to say, I think you've done a good job explaining the position in a way that sounds enticing and sounds reasonable. But I ultimately have to agree with you. I would not. Now, maybe it's something where, because it happens every 4 years, you can get it on a schedule where it's the senior class. Maybe you have like 2 required classes on government in the election process.
Yeah.
Like in their last year of high school, so that the first year they're out of high school, they're 18, they can go vote.
What if it was instead of it being a class per se, it was more like just a school program. So like if you were
yeah,
like you could
maybe
only
for
do it
people
if
who
you
were
were
interested.
That would
right,
be perfect.
yeah. So
Yeah.
it's like it's either kind of like I guess sort of like a debate team, but more obviously specific to this.
Yes.
So it's like it's only available for those in school if you are a junior or a senior, but it also the school offers to cover you and keep you in that club the 1 to 2 years after to keep it in that 4-year debate cycle, something like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, being a class, I mean, I guess I understand that, but like it would have to be something. I think it's something that the school should cover because you're still in the same like learning environment. I mean, like being able to go. I mean, like a big part of learning is doing it in a social setting, right? I mean, you want to be around people. Learning stuff by yourself is very difficult. I mean, most of the stuff I've done, I've learned by myself, but I do much better whenever somebody else is challenging me on it. Like Zach worked at Best Buy with me. Like the reason I have the TV knowledge I do isn't because Best Buy really taught me much of anything. I mean, which they did to a degree. They taught me baseline stuff, but like me and Zach delved deep into stuff because we would just have conversations on it. It's like, dude, this TV's running this processor here, and it's an upgrade from last year, and it means this and that, and it's like I wouldn't have known that just by my base level. Like, oh, I got to learn this for work. It's
Right,
like,
yeah.
It's one thing to learn and sell technology, but like, I have to know a lot of baseline stuff for a lot of stuff in that store. It's very difficult for me to get enthusiastic about anything, but whenever I have somebody challenging me, and they're like, what do you think's better between this and this? Let's dig a little deeper. It's like, as soon as there's one other person involved, the social climate begins, and it's just, that makes learning that much more memorable and exciting, I think. So I would think it should be a school-based thing, because I mean, you're with like your friends and stuff anyway, and you can, you know, debate with them as you go, and then not that they'll be your friends in a few years. Sorry, guys.
Yeah.
But
The harsh reality.
oof, yeah. I lost like 95% of my friends within the first couple of months of graduation.
See, that's the funny thing is like all my friends are still friends I had in high school.
Oof.
Well, I knew this
All
one.
3 of mine, yeah.
I knew this one prick named Jordan Boyko. I can't seem to lose that guy. But
Just can't shake him off.
yeah,
you know?
no, but but no, I'm right there with you because I like the idea of it being a program,
Mm-hmm.
but
Yeah, because then I guess you could, like you said, opt in because kids, I ain't trying to force them into something they might not have an interest in.
yeah,
I mean, I think everybody has an interest in like the rules of the game of life, at least to some degree or another. I mean, some people just want to exist and that's fine, but everybody has an opinion, like, you know, like that guy is an idiot, or like, you know, I shouldn't have to get a license to fish, or just shit like that. You know, everyone has at least this little bit of a feeling or an opinion about something that happens to do with government or policy. So like they should at least know, or at least have the option to know
what they're getting themselves into.
yeah, how to do it, how to follow, and so on.
I want to go off what you said about how you handle the 2016 election and this election. So when I went to the 2016 election, it was real easy because I was voting red.
Red no matter who.
No, it's just you know, everyone here is red.
Yeah.
You know, I was voting Trump. That's all I cared about. I looked kind of into the other people, said, oh, okay.
Right, yeah.
You know, and that was kind of it.
Mm-hmm.
This time around, I started looking at the Democratic primary. And it's a red state. So there's like no one on there but Bernie. And I'm like, well, shit. I wanna vote on my local people too. It kind of sucks.
Yeah.
I want to bring that up because to me, that's like the biggest barrier. I didn't realize it all in 2016 because, like I said, everyone's red. So I just got to vote on everything.
Yeah.
And I didn't think anything of it because I wasn't voting blue.
Right, yeah.
And this time it's like Bernie Sanders and someone for District 3.
Right, yeah.
You know, like one choice.
Yeah.
And so it's like, that's really shitty. You should be able to vote on, like, at the very, very least, you should be able to vote on the different levels of government. You know, local, state, federal.
Right.
Because, like, I want to vote Bernie, but I don't know a dang thing about this one woman on the Democratic ticket.
Yeah.
Right.
And I know at least some stuff about the Republicans.
Yeah.
And I lean conservative.
Crossover ballot.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't even know the name of that.
Well, and the thing is that, you know, we're an open primary, so you can pick which primary. Hell, half the states don't even have that. I was so, I don't know, it's something that really hit me, the realization of like, damn, no wonder everybody votes red, because you either vote red and
Right,
vote
right.
on the local people,
Right.
or you vote blue and don't get a say. It's really, really shitty.
Yeah.
I don't know. That blew my mind. I was like, I can't believe how much they don't give us a choice on it.
Mhm. I tried. I guess it was 2 years ago now to vote locally, or vote in the local election. I tried so hard to follow like a few people, and there's so many names running on like a local ticket. Like there's so much more happening locally than I ever thought. And, and I plan on. I mean, I'm gonna make like a pledge to myself to focus on it more lately. But like it's just so hard to follow local stuff. Like I'm gonna have to. I mean, I did follow like a couple of local Facebook pages.
I
and stuff.
say, yeah. The thing with the local stuff is like, so I did a lot of research, trying to kind of get everything down. And what I ended up finding out is that I would Google, the names. There was like a couple of websites where they would just compile local people and what their views are on things. And you had to go there because you weren't going to find anything else.
Right, yeah.
So I would do that, and then I would take that same name, put it in Google again, but put controversy after it.
There you go.
And so that was basically how I made my decision to vote blue, because I was like, the only two people that have controversies are A, running against each other.
Yeah.
So whoever I pick, it doesn't matter.
Right.
And B, they're both the public defenders. So I guess, there's the controversies were both that they were too good at their jobs.
Right.
Yeah,
Exactly.
So,
Yeah.
I ultimately did vote blue because I was like, it doesn't matter. Like, everyone else is pretty much fine except for these two people. They're running against each other. So I can't really vote my conscience
Right.
anyways, because I think everybody's going to do fine. So I voted blue just because I wanted to vote for Bernie, and it wasn't going to really matter who I
Right.
picked on
Yeah.
Right.
But like it was one of those things where I was afraid I was going to find someone who like, I don't want that person. But and if that would have been the case, I probably would have voted red and put uncommitted just to have the local vote.
Mm-hmm.
But it's really crappy that they put you in that situation.
Where you have
Yeah.
to either go all one way or all the other way.
Yeah.
I think it'd be really interesting if we ever ran a presidential election without the labels like the Republican or Democrat. I mean, it would be obvious in a lot of cases, but then people can run on a somewhat like independent platform without having to fall left or right.
I would love that.
I would love it too.
If people voted on ideas and idealism and things that would actually make an impact on them,
Right.
that would be the solution to all of this, really.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
as long as the the GOP and the Democratic
And the
Party
DNC.
have their dominance in the political sphere, that's never going to happen.
Right.
But yeah, I'm right there with you, man.
That would be
If we
awesome.
could just strip the titles, say we're millennials, we don't like labels,
Yeah.
So
do
yeah,
that and then ranked choice voting so that you can always fall back on who ultimately ends up being pushed by the media as the
right, yeah,
populist or whatever. But the ranked choice voting is something I've been talking about for a while too. But I think that alone would fix a lot of the problems we have in the election process. Because everyone just votes as well, if I don't vote for this person, it's a wasted vote.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But if you did ranked choice, everybody could vote for who they wanted number one. And if they just didn't get the following, it's all right, well, I still fall back to this person so that person doesn't win or whatever.
Yeah.
So I think the 2016 election, and I did share something on that, would never have ended up the way it did if we had ranked choice voting, because people only voted one way because they were afraid of the other person, or they just say
Yeah, I would have voted independent. I would have voted for Gary Johnson.
right, yeah, see, but so many people were oh, it doesn't matter, I just don't want that person in office. But you could always leave that as your third vote, and then actually say who you want, and then the next best option, and then that. So,
Well, I know we've been going for about an hour and 20 minutes, maybe 30.
I wouldn't doubt it. I didn't look at the time whenever we started, but
I knew
Yeah,
that
really
this
close,
is going to be a podcast that we would have a ton of stuff, and I don't know what your opinion is on it, but maybe we'll do another one 2 weeks out instead of a full month, just
Right.
to try and get everything covered that we didn't get to this time, because we didn't even. I was expecting, honestly, the politics to kind of go away very quickly in favor of coronavirus. We didn't even touch on that. I feel like you barely got to talk at all, almost.
Well, oh no, I got in there a few times, but yeah, Cody, this Cody, Cody W. He just man, he just dominated me, man. No. Yeah.
I don't know about that.
No, but no, yeah, there are a lot of things that we could have. Oh yeah, sorry, go ahead.
What's Crush saying?
Very good. It's Crush. I don't know if is that your guy?
Yeah, that's one of the people that follow from the old channel.
Sorry, continue.
No, but yeah, there's definitely a wide range of things that we could talk about, and if you guys would have me again, I'd be more than happy to come back and throw a wrench into the works again.
100%.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I'm good with it.
Awesome.
But I know Crush that you are. What's he saying?
He said, "Sup, boys?
We are doing a podcast
and about to wrap it up too." So
yeah,
good timing.
I know. Yeah, it's so bad because Crush, he literally he wants to support the channel so bad, and then he ends up missing the streams a lot of time just because I think he's in a different time zone than we are.
Oh yeah. Well, I appreciate you stopping in anyways. If you were interested in the material, obviously it'll go up on the page. The channel, yeah. But
yeah, we highly appreciate you, Crush. I wish we were a little bit more time synced.
Yeah. So just to recap, TLDR, what do you think about gay frogs? No, I'm kidding.
Freaking frogs, gay. Freaking frogs.
There's a chemical in the water that the government's dispersing. Oh, I could go on, but I won't.
So good.
But
no, yeah, Cody, thank you so much for having me. This has been really fun.
Dude, it's been cool to have you,
I'm looking forward to coming back soon, yeah.
Yeah, man, I'd like to have you.
All right, I guess we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. Thank you guys for joining and giving us some talking points.
Peace out.
I don't know if you want a shout out, but...
Hey, that's my boy JV in the chat. Jordan, appreciate you stopping by.
That's HK_gaming on Mixer.
Yeah, they run away from fights.
They run away from fights, yeah.
All right, see you guys.
Peace out.